Welcome back to the deep dive. You've sent us the sources, and we're ready to carve out those key knowledge nuggets so you can feel instantly up to sped.
Yeah, absolutely.
Today, we are really digging into one of the most stunning political reversals I think we've seen in a while, not just in New York City, but maybe even modern American city politics. We're talking about the mayoral election of November 4, 2025.
Right. And our sources, I mean, they're pretty unanimous. They're calling this outcome a seismic political realignment. That's not a term you throw around lightly.
No, definitely not.
And it feels, well, entirely justified when you look at it. The dynamics, the players. This was never going to be just a typical local race.
So our mission today for you listening is to really trace this improbable path, right? The path of Zohran Mamdani.
Exactly. 34 years old, Democratic Socialist, immigrant, former state assemblyman, somehow becomes the 111th mayor of New York City. It's quite a story.
It really is. So we need to understand not just how he pulled it off, but, what does this mandate actually mean? Because the city he inherits seems, well, deeply polarized now.
Energized and polarized. That's the key takeaway, I think.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. The jaw-dropping facts right off the bat. Mamdani's win, it breaks ground, a lot of ground.
It really does. First Muslim mayor, first Indian-American mayor.
And the youngest mayor the city's had in over a century. I mean, that alone is historic, a trifecta signaling a huge shift in who holds power.
And it wasn't, a squeaker in terms of the popular vote count itself. He got a clear majority, 50.4%. That pushed him over the 1 million vote mark.
1 million votes, that's significant.
It is. And it was enough to defeat the combined opposition. You had Andrew Cuomo running as an independent, the former governor. He got 41.6%.
And Curtis Sliwa, the Republican candidate.
Right. Sliwa finished with about 7.1%. So Mamdani cleared them both.
That 1 million vote total you mentioned, it also says something about engagement, doesn't it? Our sources are really stressing the turnout here. Over 2 million voters came out.
Which is the highest participation level for a New York City mayoral race since, what was it, 1969?
Wow. Since 1969. So people were definitely paying attention. They were mobilized.
Oh, absolutely. They were mobilized. And this is where it gets tricky, right? This is the central tension baked into his win and probably his administration.
How so?
Well, 50.4% is a majority, no question. But you add up the anti-Mamdani vote Cuomo plus Sliwa, and that comes to 48.7%.
Okay, so less than 2 percentage points difference between his winning total and the combined opposition.
Exactly. So yes, he has this fierce mandate from his base, a mandate for really radical change. But he also steps into City Hall facing this equally energized, powerful coalition, moderates, centrist conservatives who are actively, fundamentally opposed to his vision.
So he's got a mandate, but he's governing a city split right down the middle. That sounds like a recipe for, well, conflict.
It certainly sets the stage for it. He needs to deliver on radical change while navigating a deeply divided city.
Okay, so if that's the end result, we need to rewind. We need to look at how this all got set up. To really get Mamdani's success, you have to start with the implosion, right? The collapse of the old guard that created this opening.
Yeah, you really can't overstate how critical that was. The failure of the centrist political model, specifically under Mayor Eric Adams. Mamdani's path just doesn't exist without Adams's collapse.
Adams. He was the moderate Democrat, right? Elected to bring stability, kind of a return to the center after de Blasio. But the sources, they describe his time in office as scandal-strewn almost right away.
Yeah, scandal-strewn is putting it mildly, I think. His credibility just got chipped away constantly. There were the issues managing the migrant influx, sure, but also these persistent allegations of impropriety, corruption.
He was running for re-election initially, wasn't he?
He was. But the ground just shifted beneath him. It became politically untenable. And then September 2025, just weeks before the general election, mind you, he bowed out, dropped his re-election bid entirely.
And this was tied to that federal corruption case, even though it was later dismissed.
Exactly. The case was eventually dismissed. That's a really important detail. But politically, the damage was done. Irreparable.
And the timing of the withdrawal, that was significant too.
Hugely significant. He withdrew after the legal deadline to get his name off the ballot. So he was still listed as the incumbent Democrat, even though he wasn't actually campaigning.
Wow. So it wasn't just his candidacy failing.
No, it was like this final, very public symbol of the complete failure of moderate incumbency in the city. Adams basically surrendering didn't just open up a lane. It sort of discredited the whole establishment brand of, pragmatic centrist politics.
Which kind of ironically made Mamdani's more ideological, radical alternative seem like the only credible path forward for change.
Precisely. It created a vacuum that only a strong ideological candidate seemed capable of filling.
So Adams is out, politically speaking. The question then becomes who picks up that moderate flag. But the establishment, they got hit even before the general election chaos, didn't they? That primary.
Ah, yes, the primary shockwave, June 24th, 2025. That was the real structural pivot.
Because Mamdani went into that primary as a total long shot.
A complete outsider. Sources call him a protest candidate. He had a thin resume, practically no citywide profile outside his own assembly district in Queens. And yet,
He scores this major upset victory.
major is an understatement. He didn't just squeak by. He trounced the institutional clear frontrunner,
And that frontrunner was Andrew Cuomo, former Governor Andrew Cuomo.
beating him by about 13 points. 13. Think about that margin against someone like Cuomo.
That's staggering. Cuomo is, he's New York political dynasty.
Exactly. Three-term governor, son of a governor legend, Mario Cuomo. He had all the institutional backing, the big donors lined up, the name recognition, decades of it.
So Mamdani beating him like that, what did it signify?
It proved that the DSA-backed grassroots movement, the Democratic Socialists of America, wasn't just some fringe group anymore. They were now arguably the dominant organizing force inside the city's Democratic primary system.
It showed that the old way wasn't working anymore, the endorsements, the big money.
Right. It signaled that the traditional power brokers couldn't just count on those things to win primaries. That grassroots energy, that ideological commitment, could actually beat the machine. It fundamentally changed the playbook for running in New York.
Okay, so Mamdani wins the primary, gets the Democratic nomination. But the establishment fight wasn't over yet, was it? Cuomo didn't just disappear.
Not a chance. Cuomo, remember, resigned as governor back in 2021 amidst all those misconduct allegations. He wasn't about to just accept this primary defeat.
So what did he do?
Almost immediately, within days, he launched this well-funded independent campaign for the general election, created his own party line, the Fight and Deliver Alliance.
An independent run, so clearly designed to be a spoiler.
Absolutely. The goal was to split the vote, right? Consolidate all the moderate and conservative voters who were, frankly, terrified of Mamdani's socialist platform. He wanted to make sure the general election was still a fight, a multi-front war, not a coronation.
Which brings us to the man himself, Zohran Mamdani. We need to understand his profile because it seems like a real paradox, and maybe that's part of his appeal.
It's a fascinating mix, isn't it? He's 34, born in Kampala, Uganda, became a naturalized citizen just in 2018.
So that identity, first Muslim mayor, first Indian American, gives him that immediate outsider credibility. He understands the immigrant experience, the marginalized experience in the city.
Right. But then you look at his family, his education.
Completely different story. His parents are world-famous academics, Mira Nair, the filmmaker, Mahmoud Mamdani, the political scientist, very influential figures.
And his education track. Bronx High School of Science, which is elite public, then Bowdoin College, top-tier liberal arts, then Bank Street College of Education. That's the definition of an elite, privileged upbringing in education.
And his opponents jumped all over that, didn't they? The whole Champagne socialist attack.
Oh, yeah. They painted him as someone who adopted this radical worldview, wanting to destroy the economic system, but doing it from this comfortable perch of wealth and privilege.
That's a classic line of attack, and it can be really damaging. How did he manage that? How did he turn that potential weakness, that contradiction, into a strength?
He was actually quite masterful at using both sides of it. His outsider identity, the immigrant Muslim South Asian background, it gave him the cultural capital to speak authentically for working-class communities, communities of color.
Okay, so the identity grants authenticity.
Exactly. But then his elite education, that gave him the intellectual tools, the sophisticated language to build this really comprehensive, genuinely radical critique of the system that produced his privilege.
So he could talk theory and also talk about lived experience.
Yes, he speaks both languages fluently. High theory and grassroots grievance. It made him really hard to pin down, to fit into a neat box.
And that intellectual side probably helped to counter the inexperience arguments, too. He had a thin resume politically, but his pre-politics job became central.
Absolutely central. The foreclosure prevention housing council role, that was key.
Working with low-income homeowners in Queens?
Specifically homeowners of color, helping them fight eviction. He spent years doing that work on the ground, and he consistently said that experience is what inspired him to run.
So his big policy focus, freeze the rent, crack down on bad landlords, it wasn't just theoretical for him.
No, it was presented as a direct, authentic continuation of that hands-on work. So when critics said he was inexperienced in governing, he could point to his experience fighting the effects of the system on real people's lives. He basically reframed inexperience as uncompromised by the system.
That's a powerful narrative shield. And, okay, we have to mention it for the listeners who like the quirky details. Mr. Cardamom
Ah, yes, his brief stint as a B-list rapper.
adds a certain flavor to the profile, doesn't it?
It definitely underscores he wasn't a typical politician, but the real foundation for his political rise wasn't rapping, it was organizing. He joined the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, back in 2017.
And it's important to understand the DSA, right? They're not just about protests. They focus on electoral politics, policy change through winning office.
Exactly. It's a mass membership organization with a clear electoral strategy. He got his start organizing for Tiffany Caban's progressive DA campaign in 2019. That was a near miss, but showed the potential.
And then came his own first big win, the 2020 state assembly race in Astoria, Queens. He beat the incumbent, Arabella Simotas.
And our sources point to that race as the micro-template for the mayoral win.
The blueprint,
It
basically.
was the proof of concept. He took on an established, moderate Democrat, part of the Queen's machine, running as a DSA-backed insurgent. Used intense grassroots organizing, door-knocking, local policy focus. It worked.
So the 2025 primary against Cuomo was just scaling that up?
Essentially, yes. Taking that successful Astoria template and applying it citywide. It proved the model was potent and repeatable.
Okay, let's shift now to the core of his actual campaign message, the affordability agenda, and the strategic moves he made to make this pretty radical platform sellable to a wider audience.
Right. The strategy here was all about framing. He knew socialism as a label was toxic for many, so he didn't run on abstract ideology. He ran relentlessly on kitchen table issues.
And he explicitly promised the most aggressive affordability agenda
Since Fiorello LaGuardia. That comparison was deliberate. It immediately linked him to this history of strong, populist New York mayors who took on economic inequality directly.
And the specific policies were aimed at immediate impact, weren't they?
Very much so. Freeze the rent for all rent-stabilized apartments. That's huge.
Yeah.
A big push for building more affordable housing. And aggressive enforcement against bad landlords.
And he specifically linked those landlords
To the Donald Trumps of our city. Again, very deliberate framing. Tying his housing policy fight directly into that anti-elite populist narrative personified by Trump.
But the agenda went beyond just housing.
Oh yeah, it was broad. Universal public child care, city-owned grocery stores to fight high food prices and food deserts.
City-owned grocery stores, that's pretty radical.
But his, and maybe the most famous plank, making city buses fast and free to help working-class commuters ease their daily burden.
Okay, that's a massive wish list. Universal childcare, free buses, city groceries. The big question comes screaming, how do you pay for all that?
And that's where the core socialist critique of capital comes in. The funding mechanism is the ideology, in a way.
So tax increases.
Big ones. Raising the minimum wage dramatically to $30 by 2030, and funding all these social programs through tax increases on corporations and those earning above $1 million annually.
So basically, tax the rich and corporations to pay for universal services.
That's the core idea. The argument is the money's already there, it's just concentrated at the top. The city just needs the political will to redistribute it for public good.
So he's running on this explicitly democratic socialist platform, and his opponents, Cuomo, Sliwa, the conservative media, they hammered him on it. Communist lunatic was the phrase thrown around. How did he survive that? How did he overcome such a potent ideological attack?
This is really the key tactic, the aha moment of his campaign, according to our sources. It was about the pivot.
The pivot.
Yeah, when he was directly confronted with his most radical ideas, his socialist philosophy, he wouldn't get dragged into an ideological debate. He would reportedly simply smile and pivot to affordability.
Ah, that's clever. Don't defend the ism, defend the outcome.
Exactly. It's like a rhetorical judo move.
Hmm?
It took the abstract concept, like state intervention in the economy, and translated it into something incredibly tangible, material, and popular.
Like free childcare.
Right. Instead of arguing about Marxism, he forced his opponents to argue against things like free childcare or lower grocery bills or free buses for workers. Who wants to be the politician arguing against those things?
It makes the opponent look like the bad guy, defending the status quo that isn't working for people.
Precisely. It reframed his radicalism not as dangerous ideology, but as simple, necessary pragmatism for ordinary working New Yorkers. The Destroy the system critique kind of melted away when he just kept asking, who opposes making life more affordable?
Okay, so the affordability pivot dealt with the ideological attacks. But there was another huge vulnerability, maybe even bigger: public safety. Crime.
Definitely his biggest liability going in. You have to remember the context of 2020, the protests. Mamdani had previously called for defunding the NYPD. He'd called the department racist, anti-queer, and a major threat.
In a city like New York, which is always sensitive about crime rates, those pest statements could have sunk him.
Absolutely could have been fatal. So the campaign's success really depended on this very calculated, very precise walk-back and de-risking strategy on crime and policing.
A walk back? How did that work?
Well, first he publicly apologized. Specifically, apologized for describing the NYPD as racist. That was step one. Acknowledging the language was too far for many.
Okay, an apology. What else?
Then came the policy commitments. He pledged he no longer supports cutting the NYPD's budget. He promised to maintain current police staffing levels. And maybe the most significant signal.
Retaining the current police commissioner.
Exactly. Retaining Jessica Tisch, who is seen as, well, established, maybe even tough on crime by some.
Yeah.
Keeping her on drawn sent a huge message of continuity and stability on policing.
Wow. Maintaining the budget, keeping the commissioner. Those sound like major concessions to the center, almost contradicting his radical image elsewhere.
They are concessions, but they were strategically vital. It created what our sources call a permission structure for those moderate, maybe safety-conscious voters.
Permission to vote for him despite his other radical ideas.
Exactly. It signaled, look, I'm going to push hard on economic change, on affordability, but I won't mess with the basics of public safety. You can have both. By taking the fear of rising crime or chaotic streets off the table, he allowed those voters to focus purely on the popular economic stuff, the rent freezes, the free buses.
But it wasn't just keeping the status quo on police, was it? There was still a reform element in his plan.
Right, it was a clever bifurcated approach. Keep the NYPD budget and commissioner to reassure the center, but also signal reform to his progressive base.
How did that work?
The plan was, the NYPD focuses only on violent crime, core police work. But then he proposed creating a whole new agency, a Department of Community Safety.
And what would that department do?
It would handle the underlying issues often linked to crime, mental health crises, homelessness outreach, substance abuse intervention, and crucially, it would remove NYPD officers from those kinds of response teams.
So trying to reduce negative police interactions with vulnerable people while keeping police focused on violent crime. It's trying to satisfy both sides.
It's threading the needle. Appease the center on funding and leadership while delivering a structural reform demanded by the progressive base. It was a very careful balancing act.
Okay, let's talk about the opposition he faced, because winning wasn't just about having the right message or strategy. He had to overcome some serious, entrenched forces. This idea of the billionaire veto.
Yes, this election really feels like a historic moment where that veto failed. For decades in New York, if the city's financial elite really united against a candidate, their money, their influence, it was usually enough to sink them. Top-down power.
But not this time.
Not this time. It proved insufficient against a really well-mobilized, deeply committed grassroots movement.
Do we have specifics on the money against him?
We do. Sources cite, for example, Bill Ackman, the pro-Trump billionaire, donating $1 million just to one anti-Mamdani super PAC called Defend NYC.
$1 million from just one person.
And then there's Michael Bloomberg, former mayor, the ultimate symbol of New York's financial establishment. He apparently contributed more than that, specifically to try and thwart Mamdani's rise.
Yeah.
We're talking serious money pouring in just to stop this one candidate.
And yet, he won. Why did that shock and awe money campaign fail?
It seems to come down to the ground game versus the air war. The establishment money went into TV ads, glossy mailers, things like that, top-down messaging.
Right.
But Mamdani's campaign was powered differently. Thousands of small-dollar donors, yes, but crucially, thousands of volunteers, DSA members and others knocking on doors, making calls, having actual conversations.
Person-to-person contact.
Exactly. And this election suggests that when you compare the impact of millions spent on ads versus the sheer people power of thousands making personal contact, the grassroots approach can now neutralize that financial advantage. That's a huge takeaway for progressive politics everywhere.
Beyond the billionaires, the race got nationalized too, didn't it? It became a direct fight between Trump and Mamdani.
Very much so. Trump himself repeatedly attacked Mamdani, used that communist lunatic label again and again, tried to frame him as the face of urban decay.
And Trump didn't just attack, he made threats, right? About federal funding.
He did. He explicitly threatened to withhold federal money from New York City if Mamdani won. Said flat out, I don't want to send, as president, good money after bad. Basically saying a Mamdani mayoralty would make the city ungovernable, unworthy of federal help.
But wait, in a city as deeply democratic as New York, wouldn't a direct attack from Trump actually help Mamdani?
Oh, absolutely. It backfired spectacularly. Mamdani and his campaign masterfully countered it. In a city where Trump is incredibly unpopular, having him as your main attacker instantly elevated Mamdani.
Made him look like the anti-Trump champion.
Exactly. It transformed him overnight from this relatively little-known assemblyman from Queens into Trump's national nemesis. It gave the entire Democratic base in the city a huge, immediate reason to rally around Mamdani simply as a way to rebuke Trump.
And then Trump gave Mamdani another gift by endorsing Cuomo.
That was the real nail in Cuomo's coffin politically. Trump urging his supporters to vote for Andrew Cuomo, the Democrat. Mamdani had just beaten in the primary as the preferable alternative. It was the kiss of death.
How so?
It completely validated Mamdani's core argument that Cuomo was just part of the same old discredited establishment. If Trump saw Cuomo as acceptable, it proved Mamdani's point that Cuomo wasn't real change. It reinforced the whole narrative of the primary upset.
Okay, so financial opposition failed, national intervention backfired. What about the local media? That must have been tough.
Profoundly hostile. The sheer volume and intensity of the negative coverage were remarkable.
Like what?
You had the New York Post, famously conservative tabloid, running a huge front-page headline, "Scam Donnie." And they used quotes from Eric Adams, the discredited former mayor, calling Mamdani a snake oil salesman.
Scam Donnie! Wow, subtle.
Not at all. And then the Wall Street Journal, reflecting the voice of the financial sector, ran what sources called a sustained anti-Mamdani run for many weeks. Columns with titles like, "New York, You've Been Warned." It was a full court press from the establishment media.
Even apparent misinformation. I read something about the Times of London.
Yes, that was extraordinary. The Times had to apologize and actually delete an article that contained entirely false anti-Mamdani quotes attributed to Bill de Blasio. De Blasio was actually a Mamdani supporter, but the article had him criticizing Mamdani, a complete fabrication they had to retract.
So you've got billionaires, Trump, major newspapers all lined up against him. Why didn't it work? Why didn't these top-down attacks resonate enough to stop him?
It really points to a fundamental shift in how people, especially younger and more ideologically motivated voters, get their information and who they trust.
Meaning?
The warnings from the Post, the Journal, the TV news, they were being broadcast on platforms that Mamdani's core base might not even be paying close attention to anymore.
While Mamdani's campaign was using
Catchy social media videos, peer-to-peer sharing on platforms like TikTok or Instagram, digital organizing tools. It was a different information ecosystem. The pronouncements from the legacy media editorial boards just didn't have the same weight. It proved that peer influence, grassroots digital mobilization, could bypass traditional media gatekeepers.
one more area of attack before we get to governing, the geopolitical stuff. His criticism of Israel.
Right. This was another line of attack, focusing on his history of activism and his vehement criticism of Israel's military actions in Gaza.
There's a history there.
Yes, back in college, he co-founded the Students for Justice in Palestine chapter. And during the campaign, he went further, accusing Israel of committing genocide.
And he said something about honoring an ICC arrest warrant for Netanyahu.
He did. Stated he would honor an arrest warrant if the International Criminal Court issued one for the Israeli prime minister.
Which, of course, the mayor of New York has absolutely no power to do. It's purely symbolic.
Completely symbolic, but highly inflammatory. It led Israel's diaspora minister to label him a Hamas supporter.
So why take such a position? What was the political calculation?
It's about signaling to his base. It's fundamental to his political identity and deeply resonates with the most progressive, DSA-aligned activists, the people who powered his victory. For them, this uncompromising stance on international justice reinforces his credentials as a true outsider, someone unwilling to bow to establishment pressures, even on foreign policy.
So it solidifies the base, even if it alienates others.
Exactly. It validates his progressive bona fides at essentially no governing cost.
Yeah.
Because it's not something he actually has power over. His voters were primarily motivated by rent freezes and free childcare, but this stance provided crucial identity validation for that core progressive group.
Okay, let's shift gears. He wins. Let's talk about the victory itself and then the daunting task of actually governing. On election night, he claims this mandate for change promises an age of relentless improvement.
Yes, and the way he framed that mandate was, I think, the single most telling rhetorical moment of the whole campaign. It was extraordinary.
What did he do?
He didn't quote a typical American political figure like FDR or Lincoln or Kennedy. He quoted Jawaharlal Nehru.
Nehru, India's first prime minister.
Exactly. He invoked Nehru's famous Tryst with Destiny speech, delivered in 1947, right at the moment of India's independence from the British Empire.
Which part did he quote?
The most famous part. Long years ago we made a tryst with destiny, and now the time comes when we shall redeem our pledge. At the stroke of the midnight hour when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom. A moment comes, which comes but rarely in history, when we step out from the old to the new, when an age ends and when the soul of a nation long suppressed finds utterance.
Wow. Applying a speech about national liberation from colonial rule to winning a mayoral election in New York City, that's a statement.
It's an incredibly potent political and deliberately global framing. It wasn't casual. He was explicitly casting his victory not just as a shift in policy, but as a fundamental decolonization of power within the city itself.
Decolonization, how so?
The old power structure he's stepping away from is the historically Eurocentric, wealthy, capitalist establishment that has run New York. The soul long suppressed, finding utterance. That represents the global majority. The immigrant communities, the non-white populations, the working class, especially those with roots in the formerly colonized world, who form his core base.
So he's positioning himself not just as a progressive mayor, but as a leader of this historic shift, representing the formerly marginalized taking power.
Precisely. By invoking Nehru, he framed his win as part of a larger global historical narrative, giving his policy agenda an almost epic, maybe even spiritual significance for his supporters. It resonated very deeply.
That's powerful rhetoric, but now comes the cold, hard reality of governing, the Albany bottleneck.
Ah, yes, the immovable object. No matter how strong Mamdani's mandate feels in the city, New York City is legally a creature of New York State.
Meaning Albany calls the shots on the big stuff.
On a lot of the big stuff, yes. Especially the money. His most ambitious, most expensive promises, the free buses, the universal child care, those big tax hikes on the wealthy and corporations.
They all need approval from the state legislature and the governor.
Exactly. They require state-level sign-off from the Assembly, the Senate, and crucially, Governor Kathy Hochul.
And Governor Hochul is not exactly aligned with Mamdani politically, is she?
Not at all. She's a moderate Democrat, and she has already signaled pretty clearly that she's so far opposed to income tax increases.
Which is Mamdani's primary funding source for almost everything.
Pretty much his entire affordability platform relies on those tax hikes.
Yep.
So you have a fundamental clash baked in from day one.
Yeah.
A political war between the new progressive mayor in the city and the moderate governor in Albany seems, well, unavoidable.
It's not even about negotiation at this point. It's about a direct conflict over basic fiscal philosophy.
That seems to be the setup, yes.
But Mamdani served in the assembly. He knows Albany. He knows where the power really lies. Is he just setting himself up to fail by promising things he can't deliver unilaterally? Isn't that a huge risk?
It is a huge risk, but his strategy seems to anticipate, maybe even welcome, the confrontation. It's possible the confrontation is the point.
What do you mean?
His agenda, built on that massive turnout and the million-plus votes, seems designed to create a mandate so strong he can use it as a weapon against Albany.
Leverage.
Exactly, the inside-outside game. Inside, yes, he'll lobby Hochul in the legislature like any mayor, but outside, he has the DSA, this mobilized base. The plan seems to be to use that base to exert constant pressure on Albany.
How protest?
Protests, sure, but maybe more importantly, primary threats. Threatening to run DSA-backed insurgents against moderate Democrats in the state legislature who resist his agenda. He's betting the fear of being primaried by his energized base will outweigh their policy objections.
So use the mandate to force Albany's hand.
That seems to be the gamble. That the political cost of ignoring his mandate becomes higher for Albany Democrats than the cost of actually passing his tax hikes and spending plans.
This whole dynamic brings us back to the last big progressive hope for mayor, Bill de Blasio, served from 2014 to 2021.
Right. And de Blasio is the cautionary tale here. He came in with a similar progressive mandate, the tale of two cities rhetoric.
But he's widely seen now, even by many progressives, as a disappointment.
A major disappointment for many on the left. The perception is he got co-opted, or at least neutralized, by the system, by the real estate lobby, by the Albany machine, by Cuomo when he was governor.
So Mamdani is being called de Blasio 2.0 by some. Is that fair? What's different?
There are similarities in the initial progressive energy, but there are maybe two key differences. First, Mamdani's platform is significantly more radical, more structurally ambitious than de Blasio's ever was.
Yes.
The DSA. De Blasio had popular support, but he didn't have a highly organized, ideologically disciplined mass organization like the DSA behind him, ready to hold his feet to the fire. The DSA gives Mamdani an organized army that de Blasio lacked, one that could, theoretically, keep him from compromising too much, or even campaign against him if they felt he sold out.
So the very forces that seem to neuter de Blasio, the Albany bottleneck, the power of the billionaire veto in the background, those are the exact same forces Mamdani beat in the election, but now has to face day in, day out in governing.
That's the core challenge. His entire mayoralty hinges on whether he can survive or overcome those two powerful structures where his predecessor ultimately faltered.
De Blasio had the popular support, but maybe lacked the organization or the willingness for constant confrontation. Mamdani seems to have both.
He's demonstrated he has the organizational machine, and he certainly seems to have the political DNA for confrontation. Whether that's a sustainable way to govern is the huge question. But maybe, for this kind of radical agenda, continuous high-stakes confrontation is the only way to survive.
Okay, this has been a really deep dive. Let's try to pull it together for you, the listener. What are the key takeaways here? Zohran Mamdani pulled off this truly seismic win. How?
Well, first, by capitalizing brilliantly on the failure of the centrist model under Eric Adams. That created the opening.
Second, by neutralizing the potentially fatal socialist attacks.
Right, rebranding it relentlessly as pragmatic, tangible affordability, making it about free childcare and rent freezes, not ideology.
And third, proving that grassroots power can beat big money.
Yes, overcoming that unified financial and media opposition, the failure of the billionaire veto, is maybe the biggest strategic lesson here. Grassroots mobilization defeated top-down spending.
So what's the bigger implication? The so what?
His victory offers this really potent new template, doesn't it, for progressive, base-driven politics, maybe nationwide. It suggests you can run and win on a very ambitious tax-the-rich platform, even in a major general election, if you frame it right and mobilize effectively.
Which leads us to that final, provocative thought for you to chew on. Mamdani framed his win using Nehru's tryst with destiny, stepping from the old world of power into a new era, a fundamental change.
A decolonization of power, almost.
But as we've discussed, the core of his actual governing plan seems destined for this massive collision course with Governor Herschel and the state government in Albany. That Albany bottleneck.
An inevitable confrontation.
So the question isn't really if he can govern smoothly within the current system. Maybe the real question is this. Was his mandate, his agenda, actually designed to succeed in forcing Albany to bend? Or was the confrontation itself the entire point?
Is it a revolutionary strategy designed to fail legislatively in the short term, but succeed politically in the long term by building and fueling a continuous, maybe even national movement based on that very confrontation?
Is the fight with Albany a risk to his agenda? Or is the fight the reason for the agenda? That's something for you, the listener, to decide.